I would like to, before I introduce our next speaker, I'd like to just say a shout out for this administration, because they're doing a lot in the area of religious freedom. On the international side, there's a ministerial to advance religious freedom that was established at the U.S. Department of State last year to bring together people of different faiths to talk about ways of combating religious persecution and to encourage greater respect for religions. At the last year's ministerial, survivors of persecution spoke, and this year joint statements have been issued regarding China, Iran, Burma, where certain minority groups have been repressed, and against blasphemy laws which impeded individuals' freedom to choose their faith. Also, a religious freedom task force was created by the U.S. Department of Justice to support not only freedom to worship, but also freedom to exercise one's faith in the public square. My personal favorite was a proclamation this year on my birthday, January 16th, was recognized as a Religious Freedom Day. Just keep that in the back pocket. And then also, our next speaker, who's with the HHS, Office of Civil Rights, was established last year, January 18th. So she'll be having here talk a little bit more about what HHS is doing in the area of enforcement. Our speaker, Maya Noronha, is a senior advisor for regulatory and legislative reform at the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Prior to her appointment there in 2017, she practiced civil rights law at a law firm and worked on public policy reform at a variety of nonprofit organizations. She received a BA as well as a law degree from Georgetown University. She is a member of the U.S. Court Bar and admitted to practice before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit and for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and D.C. as well. She will focus now on government enforcement on conscience protections. Please welcome Maya Noronha, and as she comes up, we're going to prompt a video about the Civil Rights Office. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Roger Severino, and I am the Director of the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. My office is charged with enforcing 3 types of federal civil rights laws. Laws protecting the privacy and security of health information, such as HIPAA. Laws prohibiting discrimination in health and human services on the basis of race, national origin, age, sex, or disability. And laws protecting conscience and religious freedom in healthcare and human services. In January of 2018, we launched a new Conscience and Religious Freedom Division within the Office for Civil Rights to make sure our existing conscience and religious freedom laws get the focused attention that they deserve. Conscience and religious freedom are fundamental, natural human rights that are protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution and laws at the federal, state, and local level. Such protections have been part of our national story since the founding. For example, our laws have protected people morally opposed to the taking of life in war since the American Revolution and through the Vietnam War era. America also has a long tradition of not forcing anyone, including doctors or pharmacists, to help in the execution of people convicted of capital crimes. In line with this tradition, the Office for Civil Rights enforces long-standing laws protecting doctors and nurses who, for example, refuse to participate in the taking of life through abortion or assisted suicide, and people in institutions that decline to pay, cover, or refer for abortions. Patients are also protected from government punishment for declining to receive treatments or undergo procedures that violate their conscience or religious convictions. To learn more about our new Conscience and Religious Freedom Division and about all the laws that we enforce, we encourage you to visit us at hhs.gov/OCR. If you believe that a covered entity has violated your civil rights, conscience and religious freedom, or health information privacy, you may file a complaint through our website. The HHS Office for Civil Rights is dedicated to protecting all of these rights under law, and we are here to serve you.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services at taxpayer expense.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maya Noronha, and I bring greetings from my boss, Roger Severino, and Alex Azar, Secretary of Health and Human Services. Today, I'm delighted to be here at St. Patrick's. Thank you, Monica, for the invitation. When driving in Maryland, where there's Religious Freedom Way, it's a great way to come here for this welcome. So as the director of the Office for Civil Rights talked about the long history of conscience and religious freedom as foundational, inalienable rights in this country. And federal law, both the U.S. Constitution and those laws passed by Congress, have long protected it. So these rights protect Americans to freely exercise their religion. And that includes the right to act in accordance with their beliefs and to abstain, exercise their conscience, and refrain from acting. So the federal government, through federal law, is prohibited itself from discriminating or coercing its citizens in violation of their moral or religious convictions. So thank you, Monica, for outlining some of the administration actions. So I'm going to cover a little bit of what HHS did. It was started, the focus on the administration policy was announced by the president on May 4th, 2017, when an executive order was issued promoting religious liberty. And the president promised in this administration to robustly enforce conscience and religious liberty, and directed the Department of Justice to issue guidance. So there's a great guidance document that was issued that October talking about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and the protections and the requirements that the federal government should do to faithfully enforce the protections for religious liberty. So as you saw in the video, January of 2018, the Office for Civil Rights, which had long existed since the days of the Health and Human Services, HEW, actually, Health, Education, and Welfare, the Office for Civil Rights had existed, but we created a specialized division that focused on conscience and religious freedom. And why did we create that? The director, Severino, noticed that there were a rise in complaints, lawsuits, a variety of concerns expressed by religious communities. And religious freedom and conscience is often the foundation for those other civil rights laws. Those who worked in the civil rights movement had a conscientious objection to the discriminatory laws. And so recognizing that connection, the foundational aspect of conscience, led to the thoughts to specialize certain enforcement actions and policies to enforce these laws that protect religious and conscience laws. So what does HHS have to do with conscience and religious freedom? So HHS does healthcare and human services that are funded by federal taxpayer funds. So there are a number of grant programs that have religious non-discrimination protections in them. Congress put them in. There's in the maternal and child health programs, the family violence services, mental health services, projects for for transition and homelessness, substance and abuse, which a lot of religious entities receive federal funds for. There's also certain healthcare provider protections for doctors, for nurses, protecting them from being coerced to perform abortions or have to conduct sterilizations or participate in assisted suicide. So OCR has three major prongs. We do regulations and policy, we do enforcement, and we do outreach. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about our regulatory reform. So since 2009, our office has had a conscience regulation. And it dealt with these three laws called the Coates, Snow, Church, and Weldon Amendment, which dealt largely with abortion. Church also deals with sterilization, and objections that healthcare professionals might have, and protections against discrimination for exercising those objections. So in 2018, OCR, our Office of Civil Rights, I'll call it that, OCR proposed revisions because the existing regulation only addressed 3 healthcare conscience laws. However, Congress has passed many more. So we proposed to add 22 more protections and make sure that those were enforced. And so this applied not just domestically, also internationally in HHS's global health work. It applies to both providers as well as patients. You can't be coerced to perform a procedure, and you can't be coerced to undergo it. It protects children. It protects up to the elderly, end of life, beginning of life. It protects parents and surrogates who take care of another to exercise the objections on behalf of the other person. So through the regulatory process, after we proposed the regulation, we welcomed for 60 days comments from the public. And then we conducted writing the final rule. And it was just finalized last May. May 21st, 2019, there's a final rule. And its effective date is this July. So what do these many laws, these 25 laws, protect? If you have an objection, perhaps on these types of procedures, abortion, sterilization, assisted suicide, exercises of an advance directive, using abortion as a method of family planning, certain biomedical research, certain behavioral research, withdrawal of nutrition or hydration, medical treatment, surgeries, psychiatric medications. There's all sorts of federal laws that protect specific to these types of procedures that a lot of people have religious and moral convictions against. And so the healthcare providers, there's a number of ways in which they protect them from discrimination. So somebody who conducts a discriminatory act that would be prohibited by federal law, not only can you not require a provider to perform or assist, like a doctor, you can't coerce him to perform an abortion, or a nurse to assist in performing the abortion, paying directly for the procedure, counseling, referring, paying for insurance coverage, training in it, using a hospital facility for it, endorsing it, denying medical students or nursing students admission or training, refusing to license certain healthcare trainings or continuing medical education, refusing to hire or promote or extend staff privileges to doctors, firing employees, intimidating or retaliating against them. Those are all the types of actions that could be discriminatory depending on the circumstances. And they cover all sorts of different types of health HHS-funded programs. Like they are in protections in Medicare and Medicaid and CHIP, the Affordable Care Act exchanges, global health programs like PEPFAR that help HIV/AIDS healthcare services internationally. So as you saw from the video, OCR is open for business. What does that mean? We can receive complaints. So anyone who's experienced discrimination can file a complaint. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need a big law firm. You can write in. There are complaint forms online and paper forms too. And so during 2018, after we launched the Conscience and Religious Freedom, we received 1,300 complaints. And we reviewed them, and 784 of them we found that we would retain because they may touch upon one of our federal laws, which they are discrimination that is prohibited. And so we're investigating them. So note that a significant increase since we launched this division, which we spotlighted a lot of knowledge about these protections. During the 8 years of the previous administration, OCR received 10 complaints, about 1 complaint per year. So we recognize that there's a need, a desire for this enforcement, and it is federal law. So OCR had a number of enforcement cases, the 2 of them that have been resolved. One was in California and one was in Hawaii. So both of them related to several pro-life pregnancy centers who had conscious objections to posting notices that contained information about abortion services where they could be acquired, but these pregnancy centers did not provide them and had conscious objections against doing so. So one of them went all the way to the Supreme Court, and it's called the case NIFLA, the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates versus Becerra. So the Supreme Court said this likely violates the First Amendment, but a complaint was also filed with OCR. And so there was state laws in both of those cases, both California and Hawaii. So OCR issued the very first finding its office had after that Supreme Court case and after investigating the complaint against California, that this violated the Weldon and Coate Snow amendments. We had received complaints under those statutes before, but no case had been resolved with a finding of a violation. Then in Hawaii had a similar law that they passed, and so there was that also went into litigation, and there was a court permanent injunction. But OCR also issued investigated Hawaii, and the Attorney General committed to notifying Hawaii's legislature after he received our complaints and we investigated it, that he would not enforce it, that law, Act 200, against any pregnancy center in the state. So we issued a notice of resolution. So looking into these issues, these laws are being enforced that are there to protect you. And so finally, our role is also outreach, and that's why we're here, and that's why I have two other folks from our office, Vadrian and Michelle, to meet you and get to say hello. And so visit us, hhs.gov, and if you can't remember OCR, hhs.gov/conscience. And so you can learn specifically about our conscience laws, join our mailing list, even file a complaint, and also visit federalregister.gov, because as I mentioned in the rulemaking process, we rely on public comments to hear about what type of discrimination issues you face. And so remember, as my boss said, we are here to serve you. Thank you.